Well, Treasurer, thanks for your time this afternoon. Let's start with this $9 billion in decisions taken but not yet announced. What are these decisions?
Oh, well, look, we have important decisions and announcements to make and to take between now and next year's budget. But the overall message from today's MyEFO is that these are the best set of numbers for Australia's economy for more than a decade. We've gone from having a $14.5 billion deficit in 18-19 to a $5.2 billion deficit for that year, updated from the budget in May. We've also seen the surplus, which was expected to be $2.2 billion in 1920, being upgraded to a $4.1 billion surplus. So the story of these numbers, David, is that they are better than was forecast in May. They reflect the fact that we've kept spending under control, with the average growth in spending at 1.9%, the lowest of any government in 50 years, and we've also stayed well below our tax to GDP speed hump of 23.9%.
And I want to come back to that, but just sticking on this $9 billion that you will be announcing in the coming months, I note that in your income tax collections over the next 3 years, you're going to be collecting $3.6 billion less in income tax than you were expecting back in May. Is it fair to assume that there may be more income tax cuts coming?
Well, you can make as many assumptions as you like, David. I'm not going to be making any announcements here today other than to say that the coalition has a proven track record of reducing taxes. We've legislated tax cuts through the parliament, both for businesses as well as for households and families. Labor opposed a number of those, and we still got them through, and because we want more people to keep their hard-earned income.
You point to the fact that you've kept spending under control, and indeed spending is low, about $3.5 billion lower than was forecast back in May. But it's really receipts to the government, your collections, that have gone up more than $12 billion. That's the big reason for this improved bottom line, isn't it?
Well, the improvements in nominal GDP reflect improvements in the terms of trade. But you're also right that we've been getting improvements on the revenue side as more people find work. And one of the great success stories of the coalition government has been the fact that we've created nearly 1.2 million new jobs. We've seen more women get into the workforce than ever before, more young people get a job than ever before, and more seniors entering into the workforce. And the net result is more people are paying tax as a result. This is good news for the economy because the economy is growing. We're growing faster than any other G7 country except the United States, and we are doing so with the support of the IMF and the OECD, and having our AAA credit rating reaffirmed. So the news across the economy, the news in today's numbers is very supportive of the government's economic plan, which is working.
Why have you cut research grant funding by nearly $330 million?
Well, what we've seen is that the grants have been kept for these particular block grants at the same level for 2019 as they were in 2018 at $1.9 billion, and they'll rise to $2 billion in 2022. The money has just been redirected to other education purposes, money for facilities, money for scholarships and for student places. So we continue to strongly fund research in a number of ways, and we continue to support this particular program, but we have ensured that some extra money has gone to other education purposes.
All right, let me ask you about the overall economic outlook. Growth and wages growth have been revised down a bit for the coming financial year. Why is that?
Well, growth only came down marginally from 3% to 2 3/4, and this reflected the impact of the drought, to be honest. And there's some expectation that agricultural exports will be about 10% lower than expected. But at the same time, going out to 1920, David, we'll see growth get back to 3%. So the Australian economy is growing strongly. And as I said, we've been creating new jobs, been cutting taxes. We've had our AAA credit rating reaffirmed. And of course, the budget is coming back into surplus for 1920. But what will be a big wet blanket across the Australian economy is Labor's $200 billion worth of new taxes. And it doesn't matter what the question is. For Labor, the answer is only to increase taxes. Now, Chris Bowen, in 2013, after we came to government, did a speech at the Press Club where he set what the parameters or the criteria were for the coalition to be successful economically. He said that unemployment needed to be below 6.25%. Well, as you know, it's now at 5%, and the unemployment numbers forecast have been revised downwards, which is good news in this MyEFO. He also said that we needed to maintain a AAA credit rating, which we have done. He said that the Australian economy needed to be in the top 10 economies of the world, which we have done. And he said that we needed to stay below a tax to GDP ratio of 23.7, and we're just above 23% now, so we've done that.
All of that's true, Treasurer.
Chris Bowen's own standards,
the government too used to say that debt was at crisis levels, and net debt has doubled under your watch.
Well, actually, if you look at the MyEFO announcement today, it's a very strong and positive story about net debt because it's coming down to just above 18% to 1.5% by the end of the medium term. That's an amazing success story in terms of paying back Labor's debt. When we left government back in 2007, David, as you remember, there was cash in the bank. There was a $20 billion surplus. There was no, net government debt. Now we inherited from Labor when we came to government $240 billion of accumulated deficits on their watch, plus $120 billion of deficits still to come. So we've been gradually winding back the payments, the expenditure. We inherited spending growth at 4% per annum. Now we've got it down to just 1.9%. This is part of the success story. Our first job is to deliver the budget back into surplus, and our next job after that is to pay back Labor's debt.
Let me just turn to a couple of other issues, Treasurer, while I've got you there. The decision of the Morrison government not to shift the embassy in Israel at the moment, but to recognise West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, hasn't gone down well with all in the government there in Israel. One minister close to Benjamin Netanyahu says it's a mistake, that Jerusalem needs to be a whole and united eternal capital of Israel. Who's right?
Well, David, I welcome the Prime Minister's speech and his statement and enunciation of the government and Australia's position. It was a very clear and strong and principled statement by him. It was the product of a carefully considered process that we and the government undertook. And now I think what we've announced is consistent with our long-standing position, which is to support a two-state solution. And so therefore our announcement is a step towards that two-state solution, and it is consistent with our previous positions, which is to support Israel's right to exist behind secure, recognised borders, and to also recognise the Palestinians' right to their own independent homeland. And that is obviously a process that needs to be negotiated between the two parties.
Sure, but what is Josh Frydenberg? What is the capital of Israel?
Well, we have recognised West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and that is where the Knesset is. That is where the ambassadors go and have their credentials presented. We have not decided to move our embassy. Our embassy is staying in Tel Aviv, but we're setting up a defence and a trade office in West Jerusalem.
But does that mean you disagree with a whole and united Jerusalem into the future?
Well, look, David, our position is that we support Israel's capital in West Jerusalem. We recognise it, and at the same time we recognise that the Palestinians and their future capital will be in East Jerusalem. But again, these are
Where would the
many
Western
issues
Wall
to be
be? Would
worked
that
out
be in
between the
Israel,
parties.
or would that be in the Palestinian capital?
Well, David, I'm not going to get into a geography battle with you here.
That's exactly what Australia's done now, isn't it? By drawing this geographic distinction.
No, what Australia has done is announced a position which is consistent with having a two-state solution to the challenge in the Middle East. But if you look at the Prime Minister's speech, it was even much broader than just a discussion of Israel's capital. It was also a discussion of
absolutely. But this is the bit that's upsetting
deal,
the Israelis.
as well as calling out.
It's not something the Americans have done. The British have done.
UN.
We are drawing a distinction here, and the Israeli government seems to have an issue with it.
Well, we have made a decision that is consistent with Australia's support for a two-state solution. I think it's an advance on where we've been, and I think the Prime Minister should be congratulated for going through this process and for the strong and principled speech that he has made.
Final one, are you a little annoyed that your colleague, or the National Party MP, Andrew Broad, has become embroiled in a sex scandal? He's resigned today. You're out there trying to sell the government's good news on the budget bottom line. This must be a frustration.
Well, look, I think for the people of Australia, what they are focused on is ensuring that there are lower taxes and there are more jobs, and that is going to be the product of the good news that we announced today in the MyEFO statement. That is what matters to the Australian people. Now, media commentators like yourself might like to talk about those other matters. The Deputy Prime Minister's made a statement about that, and I think that's the end of it. What I'm focused on as the country's Treasurer is continuing Australia's 27 consecutive years.
And I appreciate that, but just let me try one more time here, Josh Frydenberg. You don't think voters too get annoyed at these family values National Party MPs doing stuff like this?
Look, I'll leave that up to the individual voters and members of the communities to opine on. What I'm focused on is economic matters. What I'm focused on.
No condemnation from you
today
about a married colleague on a taxpayer-funded trip behaving like this?
Oh, well, look, clearly that conduct is inappropriate, and he's taken the necessary steps. But what I'm focused on is continuing to promote the government's economic plan and economic message, which has delivered more than 1 million new jobs, lower taxes, and a budget that is on track to be in surplus, the first budget in surplus since the last year of the Howard Costello government more than a decade ago. Chris Bowen, my political opponent, he likes to talk about Paul Keating. Well, I say to him, these are the surpluses that Australia needs to have.
Very good. And congratulations staying on message, Treasurer Josh Frydenberg, on today's budget news. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
All the best.